Qui fait que l'homme, quand même, accepte de vivre et accepte de poser des gestes. Qu'est-ce qui dirige ces gestes?
Qu'est-ce qui dirige ces gestes? Le souci précisément des autres hommes, en grande partie, le souci aussi de son propre bonheur, les deux étant d'ailleurs liés d'une manière à peu près inextricable, parce que je crois que chacun est lié à tous et personne ne peut se réaliser sinon à travers, avec les autres. Et rien n'est fait de valable pour et par les autres, sinon à partir de quelque chose qu'on a également profondément ancré en soi-même.
Simone de Beauvoir was born January 9th of 1908. She is regarded as one of the leading figures in feminist existentialism and feminist theory. Further, her ideas help mold the concept of intersectionality and how we view political and economic and social status as a potential means of discrimination. One of her first major nonfiction works was The Ethics of Ambiguity. She builds and responds to the idea that we are both humans who are stuck in between facticity and transcendence. Facticity being the thing that we actually are at the given moment, and then transcendence of what we can be in the future. Ultimately, our potential. This question of who I am and what we could become in the future gives way to a ton of existential angst, and ultimately, this ambiguity itself is at the forefront of her work. De Beauvoir ultimately argues that this dichotomy and this dilemma can also be extended into further things in life. Am I an individual or am I a member of a group? Am I a Christian? Am I an American? Am I a Muslim? These questions ultimately create a huge amount of tension in your life. Not only does this create tension, but the idea that we are free to choose, the idea that we are almost free to define ourselves, is equally as scary. But let's look at this from a wider lens. Let's look at this from a more social and wider historical scale. Simone de Beauvoir argues that theologians, religious institutions, academics, and intellectuals, that when they attempt to answer this question, what they are ultimately doing is shying away from a binary decision. They are ultimately trying to shave away one side of it. They aren't trying to necessarily answer the question as a whole, but ultimately trying to narrow down the parameters in which they can answer this question. Why would they do this, you would ask? They are trying to completely avoid their ambiguity of maybe, perhaps, existing in the middle. Maybe you aren't one singular thing. Maybe that situation is more complex than what you think it is, and it doesn't have one singular answer. But in recognizing this, you are doing something. You are ultimately confirming the very ambiguity and tension in your life. Because when I ask the question, am I an individual, or am I a member of a group, a nation, a religion? Simone de Beauvoir would argue, you are simply both. That decision to choose is a complete false binary opposition. And also, the philosophies of the past, the politics of the past, they ultimately exist as a very comforting convenience for you. How convenient that one thing can be answered with one singular factor. How convenient that one specific group of people, that one race, or one simple ideology is the problem at hand. Simone de Beauvoir quotes in her book, "Cowardice Does Not Pay," and ultimately, this is what she's referring to. That much of the politics, the religion, the ethics of the past are ultimately convenient, and they don't contend with the reality of living within a world that consists of multitudes. Because when you take a look around you, you see that this is what normal, common people do. They use bad faith tactics in order to escape the tension and to escape the ambiguity in their life. And as the historical timeline goes, we have recognized something's missing. There are simply age-old existential questions that have not been able to be answered. So what has been the historical response? It is to come up with a complete philosophy, a rationale to this that makes us feel complete, that we simply have the answers, and there's no real reason to question much further than this. Modern politics still suffers from this. Everything is simply the liberals' fault. That this modern decay of society stems from young people, the liberal media, etc. We feel fulfilled by rationalizing things in a context that isn't exactly correct, yet it makes it feel as if it is. But as an existentialist, Simone de Beauvoir sees that we are condemned to be free, that ultimately we have freedom to make this decision, and it is our responsibility. And this freedom is so intense that even doing nothing, cowering away, is ultimately a choice you are making in your freedom. This too causes tension, This, too, scares the living hell out of people. But according to de Beauvoir, people react differently to this. And this reaction starts as children. After childhood, we can go into the realm of the sub-man. According to de Beauvoir, the sub-man is someone who just saw, as a child, how much freedom was involved in their future. How many decisions that you could make, and they sort of shut down. They became completely apathetic. Nothing really interested them, nothing really warranted desires, and ultimately, in the end, they condemned themselves to no freedom. This is significant because ultimately, you become malleable. You can ultimately be persuaded to become a puppet for other people's endeavors. A visual example of this would be something like a sheep, someone who just goes along with the status quo. Further down the pipeline, we get to the serious man. In order to quell that anxiety, to quell that existential angst and ambiguity, the serious man supposedly has everything figured out. I'm a proud libertarian, no government better stomp on my feet, I have everything figured out. The same thing can be said about Christians, as they are complete beings, as they have been saved. Not only have they been saved, they have the complete moral compass in their hands with the Bible. What more could you ever want? You have everything in the palm of your hands with religion. The next on the list is something everyone has heard of. Everyone knows of this, and that is the nihilist. You see, the subman sounds kind of nihilist, but unlike the actual nihilist, the subman doesn't actually know, a lot of the times, that anything is missing. They are often completely unaware. The nihilists, on the other hand, they understand. They understand not only that there is something missing, but there is nothing that will quell that angst. So why try at all? Why do anything at all? This is ultimately a scary dilemma, according to de Beauvoir, because ultimately, the nihilist is right. They're onto something. They know that there is a disconnect in their understanding for the world. They ultimately understand something is missing in their life. Like the sub-man, the nihilist is rejecting the seriousness and the serious man. They would ultimately find it laughable that people could come to complete conclusions on how the world operates and ultimately how they operate. Yet, ironically, they fall under the same trap as well. They also have stumbled upon a stagnant position that nothing matters, and there is ultimately no point. That is also a conclusion, and their journey is done. The typical nihilist would also laugh at the serious man, yet they're also making the same mistake themselves. Because ultimately saying that life doesn't matter, that your life has no meaning, is ultimately finding meaning in your life. Because according to de Beauvoir, meaning ultimately has to do with your actions. Your everlasting breath on earth is meaning in itself. You must simply decide what you do with your actions to define your meaning. Are you going to maximize freedom for others? Are you going to work as a business consultant at a healthcare corporation just to potentially lay off workers to maximize profit? There's a million things that you could do, and that ultimately does not have to be a bad thing. But to de Beauvoir, what are we supposed to do about this? How do we fix this? And what is the ultimate prescription? The prescription is to focus on people and be honest, completely wholeheartedly honest. Because there's something extremely important laid throughout the ethics of ambiguity. In order to gain freedom, in order to become truly free, away from your ambiguity, away from your other forms of existential angst, you need to focus on the other. You need to focus on other people's freedom. You simply cannot be free without the freedom of others, according to de Beauvoir. So much of our lives and our goals and our values to people who are not nihilists come from within others. If your goal is to be the very best teacher that you can be, the very best parent you can be, this requires the input of others, and you cannot avoid this at all. The other isn't the other. The other is you, and you are the other. And because of this, we must change our socioeconomic and political systems in order to accommodate this. That when you hurt someone else, in the end, you only cripple your hopes and dreams to begin with. Further, we must approach this tension and this ambiguity as something that doesn't necessarily have to be bad. We must fully accept it, take responsibility, and ultimately understand the parameters that surrounds it, with the main parameter surrounding this dilemma being the freedom of others. So if you want to maximize your freedom, if you want to maximize your ability to reach a specific goal, start with the people next to you.